Hello and welcome to Cloud Forest Vibes. My name's Bobby, and this is how I grow orchids and carnivorous plants. Hello and welcome to Cloud Forest Vibes. Today's video is another Care Collab video. This time it's just me and Ninja Orchids, and the topic of the conversation today is Laelia harpophylla. Laelia harpophylla, or its common name, the sickle leaf Laelia, is found in Brazil at elevations of 500 to 900 meters in shady, humid habitats as a medium-sized, warm-growing, epiphytic plant with these sickle-shaped leaves, which is where it gets its common name from. It blooms in the fall in Brazil and late winter and spring in northern climates on a 6-inch, several flowered, clustered at the top, inflorescence. According to ISOP, it grows best in warm temperatures, not cool, with little to no dormancy, and less light, with more water than other rupiculus Laelias. Yes, it is an epiphyte, and yes, it is a rupiculus Laelia. So, very interesting indeed. Mine is, fortunately enough, to be in bloom. I do have, I guess, a pretty good climate in here. It's blooming when it's supposed to bloom in the wild, so that's a very good sign. I live in Washington, D.C., so the mid-Atlantic region of the United States, and I do grow in my apartment in a grow tent. So I have near greenhouse conditions in here, and year-long some plants do what they should do instead of go dormant. So that's all I'll say about that for now. I acquired this plant on May 18th of 2019 from Equigenera, and this was my first rupiculus Laelia. When it came to me, it was rootless. It was a nice sized plant. Despite its condition, I mounted it on this mount with some sphagnum moss, and it grew like 6 or 7 growths for me its first season with me. Really strong plant. I found out pretty quick that the best grow moss was a huge mistake. In my environment, it stays moist far too long, and this plant does like a wet-dry cycle. Even though it does like to grow more moist than other rupiculus Laelias, for me, that just means I water this every day and it dries every day, instead of letting it dry for maybe a day or two in between. Now, over the years, I have gradually increased the light for this plant, and that, I believe, is why we have blooms this year. Now, this is the second batch of blooms. I had another bloom on this plant earlier this year from this growth. These 2 spikes have formed, and we almost have 4 blooms. The 4th one just didn't quite make it. So, but the secret to my success, I believe, with this plant this year was extremely elevating the light level. I really did grow this quite bright. It used to live in the middle shelf over near the window before, so it got some morning sun and then about low to medium light, honestly, from the LED. It just wasn't getting enough LED light. So I've moved it up. It has a really nice bright spot up here in the top middle area on the back wall, and you'll see the leaves are definitely, anthocyanin showing. Looks like almost the plant is stressed, but really, honestly, that's how this wants to grow. The new leaves that are coming out are nice and green. All the new growths are green. So what you see here really is the older growths that got used to a different light level, now are dealing with a much brighter light level, and those growths are kind of showing a little bit of poutiness. But you have some yellowing leaves. Those are really old growths. This will drop leaves after a certain period of time, but it does hang on to its foliage for quite a while. So, healthy plant indeed. So, I'm not planning on changing anything about my care for this plant. Next year, I think I really nailed it. This year, finally, I've had this plant for several years now, and it took this long to get it to bloom, and not just one bloom, but 5 blooms in one season. That's a huge accomplishment for me, definitely, with the Laelia. This is my first Laelia to bloom for me, and it was my first Laelia, so definitely special plant to me. Very much love this plant, and I would never ever get rid of this thing. This is my favorite Cattleya in my collection, I believe. Now, in my tent, this plant gets intermediate conditions. It does get somewhat warm days. It does get some sun again in the summertime, so it gets warmer than some of the other plants on this side that don't see sun. It gets really high humidity. I've got 85% almost all the time in my tent. Sometimes it goes down to about 80. And this winter it'll go down to about 75, I believe, before my humidifier will kick on and take over. I water this plant daily from spring to fall. Again, it's bare rooted. My mistake growing this too moist was just that. It dumped all its roots and it started to really sulk, so I picked all of the moss off the mount, and there is no fishing line holding that thing on. It is firmly attached to its piece of cork. It really does like it. There is some live epiphytic moss starting to grow on the cork, and it really seems to enjoy that, so I'm going to let that keep doing its thing. And again, I water it every day, so it does dry daily. It gets a lot of air circulation, and nothing stays moist that long on that far wall, except for maybe a couple plants at the very bottom. In the wintertime, I will water this down to about maybe every 2 or 3 days. I will grow it much drier. It does not like to stay moist in the cool temperatures. If my temps at night stayed a little bit higher, I would probably treat this the same way, but I drop an extra 5 degrees or so, maybe 7 degrees in the wintertime at night, and that really does not suit this plant. So I try to water it only in the mornings, make sure it's dry by the evening, and then I will let it sit dry for a day or so and just thrive off the humidity. Feed wise, I've started to feed everything the same this season, so everything's about 80 parts per million, and I just feed the heck out of it. Every other time when I'm watering it, basically it's getting fed. And in the wintertime, I might feed it once every 2 weeks or so. It just depends on how it's growing. Right now it's starting to mature its latest new growth, and I don't see any new ones, so I'll probably really scale back the feeding until I see new growth. Once it starts to push out new growth or new roots, I will gradually start feeding it more frequently again. And definitely once the temperatures start to rise in the spring, it will usually jump. You'll see several new growths come out, a flush of new roots, and that is definitely the time to start feeding it for me. Again, it gets bright light. I don't give this thing any full sun. It gets some morning sun through a little bit of shade cloth in the window for maybe an hour or two, and then the rest of the time it's about 8 to 10 hours of pretty high LED light. It's about 2 feet under the grow light, so I consider that very, very, very bright indirect light. It's not Tolumnia bright or Brassavola bright, but it's not very far off. And that is really that is all the culturing care I really have. But what I will do, since this plant is in bloom, is I will take the camera off the tripod and we will take a nice close look at not only the plant itself, but these awesome blooms. So here are the blooms. I will not waste any time there. I know that is what everybody really wants to see. So here we are, beautiful orange. Yes, that is pretty much the true color of them. This one, I'll get it focused. You see the lovely little lip. It's got white on it. It's fringed around the edges and it kind of curls back. And there's a bit of a trumpet shape to the column coming down. Really, really neat. This spike has both blooms open. The other one's a bit more hidden. And this one here, again, really tried to make it. The bud is just starting to crack open, but unfortunately didn't quite make it for the collab. The plant itself, again, really, really cool. It's in really great shape. My dogs are going nuts. Give me a moment. The joy of dogs. Anyhow, so sorry about that. The mount, like I said, is growing some epiphytic moss on it. The roots are firmly attached. Really neat. They actually just trail down. I'm always trying to keep them out of other plants. There's definitely some tired roots in there, but lots and lots of healthy ones. Really neat. This one was one of my first plants to fully take to its mount and get the fishing line cut off and just be able to go do its thing. But again, last look at the blooms. Again, thank you so much. That is my care collab. Thank you, Nina, for helping me put this together, and any of you who grow this plant want to hop in on this in the future, please contact Nina or I. We definitely tried to reach out to lots of people, but I couldn't find anybody. Anyhow, thank you so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed, and until next time, please stay safe and happy growing.